The pop was so crisp it left a mark on the silence. Friday 6:47 p.m., and he was the last one out of the fourth-floor office, air conditioning humming, ceiling lights burning, 40 desks empty and half melting into the dark. He was packing the leftover bubble wrap from the new monitors when his thumb found the first bubble. Pop! One crisp, tiny tark that hung in the dead air like a struck wine glass, sharp enough to feel in his teeth. That sound hooked him. He pressed another, then another. Too fast, one slow, too fast, one slow, watching each round dome flatten with a glassy snap, the plastic whispering crick-crick between his fingers. He checked the door out of habit. He was alone, and somehow that permission made each pop land harder. His shoulders began to unclench. He laid a full sheet across the desk and walked both hands down it like a typewriter, 30 pop-pop-pops in perfect sequence, each one landing right in his ear like a dentist's little hammer. The rhythm tightened. He couldn't stop. He finished that sheet and reached for the next, the pile of finished plastic growing at his feet. The building lights flickered off while he wasn't watching. Suddenly he was standing in the dark, alone, surrounded by the soft ghosts of his own popping. He froze, thumb hovering over the sheet. For a moment the silence felt heavier than the noise had been, as if the room had been holding its breath with him. He didn't know when he'd stopped being a man packing boxes and started being a man chasing a sound. Then he took a breath, popped one last bubble in the dark, and carried the whole roll home. Maybe we don't chase the pop, we chase the proof that we can make something perfect in a world full of noise. What harmless little ritual is quietly owning your life right now? This story is really about the ASMRification of ordinary labor, the moment a chore stops being work and becomes a private performance. Most people treat ASMR as relaxation science, but the genuinely interesting part is the moral boundary. Popping at your desk is fine, popping alone in the dark feels transgressive, though nothing actually changed. Here's the unexpected part: the office wasn't calm before that first pop, the calm only arrived because he made a tiny defiant noise inside the silence. Noise, not quiet, is what finally let him exhale. Salt crust flaked from his fingertips as he leaned into the bathroom mirror. 3 days of ocean wind had cemented something gritty into every pore along his jawline. He pressed his thumb against the skin and felt the resistance, tiny plugs seated deep, each one a dark pinprick in a field of waxy shine. Hot steam curled up from the sink, fogging the glass while his pores softened. First press yielded nothing, just a slick squeak of oil. He repositioned, fingers bracketing a blackhead, and applied steady inward pressure. A soft click against his nail. A pale thread of sebum slid out whole, capped with a dark speck like a root. He rolled it onto the cloth, leaving a perfect comma of oil. The next one released with the same clean give. Then another. Another. His chin grew lighter, dimpled with clean holes. Cold water rinsed the last residue and his tongue traced smooth, open skin. Was it wrong to feel that good about something so gross? There is a quiet intimacy in extracting what the world deposited in you, each blackhead a grain of sand, a gust of wind, an hour of sun. The satisfaction isn't vanity, it's reclamation. Most people would call this grooming, but it reads more like a ritual of return, a way of telling the ocean it can't keep what it left behind. The crunch sounded like stepping on fresh snow, but it came from his own jawline. For 3 days, that white head had been a tiny pressurized balloon, throbbing a low, constant pulse he caught in the fluorescent bathroom light every single morning. It taunted him through meetings, through dinner, through his whole day, a pressure he could feel from across the room. Tuesday night, steam from the shower had softened everything, the mirror fogged and then cleared. He pressed his index fingers on either side of it, not squeezing, not aggressive, just steady, patient pressure, the way a locksmith works a lock. The skin yielded, stretched thin and translucent. And then the crunch. The core slid out in one smooth, perfect cylinder, pearl white, intact, surprisingly long, and landed on the quartz countertop with a microscopic tick. No blood. No mess. Just a clean crater where the throb had been. He watched it sit there, a perfect pearl of weeks of build-up, gone in 3 seconds. The relief hit like a cool hollow filling in where pressure used to live, that specific, almost euphoric lightness that only comes when something that bothered you stops bothering you forever. He stared at his reflection, the spot already calm, the skin already settling back into place. He wiped the counter, washed his hands twice, and went to bed without once checking the mirror again. There's a strange satisfaction in how the body can carry a small war for days and end it in 3 seconds.
Was he wrong to feel like he'd just won something?
There's something almost ritualistic about skin-picking culture, an entire genre of video built around the shared catharsis of release. The storyteller calls it a pearl, framing a bodily waste product as a jewel, which says more about how we value tangible proof of our own problems finally ending. His real reward wasn't the pop itself, but the overnight silence, the absence of a throb that had been claiming his attention for days without him noticing the toll. Small, discreet relief may be the most underrated luxury we have. That first scrape hit his ears like a whisper meant only for him, a razor blade dragging across cold, dry soap in a dark room at 2 a.m. He was buried in a cramped dorm bed, headphones clamped on, the lights off, a week of finals still vibrating in his shoulders. The blade whispered against the bar, that dry, crisp scrape, the same sound as tearing fresh paper, and goosebumps walked up both his arms before he could stop them. The tension he had been nursing since midterms unwound strand by strand, like a knot pulled patiently loose. His shoulders, locked for 5 days straight over a study desk, dropped a full inch. Then the video shifted. The carver reached for honey, spooning a slow golden ribbon into a wooden bowl, and he caught himself holding his breath, jaw slack, phone hovering 6 inches from his face. That was when a cat walked into the frame. It swiped to pour through the honey, licked itself clean for 30 seconds, and he almost laughed out loud in the pitch-black room. The silence between sounds was part of the show, no music, no voice, just the blade and the soft give of the soap, his heartbeat slowing to match the rhythm. Part of him wanted to break the spell. It was ridiculous, a grown man hypnotized by soap, but his thumb hovered over the screen, refusing to move. The final cube clicked home, and the static drained right out of him. He replayed it 4 times before sunrise. How many times have you lost a whole night to a video you can't explain? ASMR is often written off as an internet oddity, but the tingle is a genuine neurological response triggered by close-range, non-threatening sounds. Yet the deeper appeal here isn't the sensation, it's closure. A student drowning in unanswerable exams and unfinished projects watches a stranger finish something, perfectly, in under 10 minutes. We don't watch ASMR to relax, we watch it to watch someone complete a loop we can't close ourselves. The cat swiping at the honey is the punchline nature adds to our careful control rituals. The crack of the spoon against sugar was so sharp she felt it in her teeth. 11 at night, alone in a tiny apartment kitchen, overhead light off, nothing but the glow of the stove hood above the gas burners. For a full week she had been saving this ramekin, her one splurge from the patisserie on Rue de la Roquette, the same shop she passed on her commute and had walked past for months before finally caving. Now she cradled the chilled custard in one palm, and the sugar crust glinted like frosted glass under the warm bulb. She tapped the back of the spoon against it once, softly, just to hear the bright tap-tap echo off the tile. She did it again, twice, 3 times, because the sound was worth repeating. Then she committed. The spoon plunged in and the entire surface shattered at once with a crackle that filled the small room, chchchhh crunch, cold, brittle sugar giving way to silky warm vanilla beneath. The layer broke into jagged golden shards. But here came the twist, one piece of caramelized sugar stuck fast to the roof of her mouth, and she worked it loose slowly with her tongue, savoring the tiny crunch as it finally gave. She dipped the spoon again. Silent. Perfect. She ate the whole thing standing over the sink, steam rising, custard still warm, and it was the closest thing to peace she'd had all week. Is that weird, treating a dessert like it's a ceremony? Or is that just what happiness looks like when nobody's watching? There's an argument buried in this story about who gets to have sensory pleasure. She didn't light candles or plate the dessert, she stood over a sink at 11 p.m., which is almost an apology for indulgence. The real craving here wasn't vanilla and burnt sugar, it was the permission to be wasteful with a single beautiful moment in a week spent rationing everything else. Noteworthy, nobody saves a dessert this carefully unless they're starving for something that has nothing to do with food. The pop was louder than it had any right to be, a wet, sharp crack that ricocheted off the tile and filled the tiny bathroom like a snare drum. It had taken 3 days to earn that sound. 3 days of the whitehead living on his chin, a pressurized dome of ivory under translucent skin, pulsing with every heartbeat. The fluorescent light caught it like a spotlight, glowing impossibly white against the redness around it, taunting him from every mirror he passed all week. By day 3 a rough cap had hardened over the top, angry under his thumb, and every blink seemed to remind him it was there. He'd been circling it all day, flexing his jaw, feeling that pressure build behind his face. Finally he braced both hands on the sink, leaned in close, and pressed his fingertips around it. Not with nails, he knew better. He applied steady pressure and watched his own eyes go wide in the reflection. The resistance pushed back, firm and unyielding, and for a moment nothing moved. Then it gave way. The core shot out in a single pearl cylinder, arcing 6 inches and splattering the mirror in a perfect radial streak. No blood, just that clean separation of plug from pore. The crater collapsed inward, pink and fresh, already sealing itself shut. The relief was instant. There's something almost primal about releasing pressure that's been building for days, the body begging you to just get it over with. Would you have been able to resist, or would you have gone for it too? Pop culture treats the pimple as pure comedy, but dermatologists actually warn against at-home extraction. The risk of scarring and infection is real. What this story really captures is a kind of ritualized self-ownership, that urge to fix what bothers us in the moment, consequences be damned. It's the same impulse behind doom scrolling, impulse buying, and every other instant gratification decision we later rationalize. The pimple is never just a pimple, it's the smallest arena for the eternal fight between patience and relief. The throb in his jaw had ticked like a metronome for 3 days, and at 2 in the morning it finally won. He stood over the bathroom sink with the magnification mirror blazing, hunting the source, a deep, blind cyst buried along his jawline, no head at all, just a hard marble rolling under the skin. Hot compresses had done nothing for 3 nights, so he reached for the kit, sterile needle, alcohol wipe, and hands he didn't know could stay this steady. His reflection stared back without blinking, and the whole bathroom hummed like a held breath. The needle slipped in at the exact right angle, and instead of pus, clear serum welled up, clean and pressureless. He pressed cotton pads gently, and the whole thing gave way like a cork leaving a bottle. A solid cylinder of white keratin slid out in one piece, intact as a pearl. The relief hit like a cool hollow where the ache used to live, and he held the prize up to the light, genuinely beautiful in its absurd perfection. Then his cat jumped onto the counter and batted the trophy straight into the drain before he could show anyone. His girlfriend found him crouched over an empty sink, pointing at the drain, swearing he had just pulled a perfect pearl out of his own face. She raised an eyebrow, said sure, and went back to bed. He's spent every day since wondering how the best outcome of his entire week became the least believable thing he's ever said. The cleanest win of his life came with 0 witnesses and no proof. Would you have believed her? There's a reason we reach for witnesses the instant something goes right. Perfection is a private experience, and the urge to be believed is the second half of every small victory. But this story is secretly about trust. The girlfriend's casual shrug is the real plot, because she was right not to care about the keratin pearl. What reads as frustration is actually the healthiest relationship dynamic in the whole story. The wet slip against her fingertip was unmistakable. At 2 in the morning, hunched over the bathroom sink with a magnifying mirror clamped to the tile, she had been waiting for this moment for weeks. The pressure behind her earlobe had been building for days, a constant, dull ache that made her jaw clench in her sleep and left her rubbing the spot raw every time she sat at her desk. Tonight it had finally crossed the line from nuisance to emergency. She tilted her head, positioned the LED light, and pressed. Not a pop. A slow, wet unspooling, like warm honey sliding off a spoon, and the relief hit her like a wave. Her jaw dropped open, her shoulder dropped 3 inches, and she actually gasped, not from pain but from the sheer overwhelming absence of it. She caught the intact sack on a cotton round, pearlescent and whole, and held it under the light like a strange jewel. For a long, silent second she just stared at it, marveling that something so small had stolen so much comfort from her life. Then her phone buzzed against the counter. The dermatologist portal. She glanced at the screen without thinking, expecting another appointment reminder, and the words landed like a punch to the chest, pathology results benign. She laughed, a sharp, cracking sound that bounced off the tile, and her elbow knocked the magnifying mirror clean off the mount. It shattered in the sink, a dozen pieces scattering across the porcelain, and she spent the next 10 minutes picking tiny shards out of the drain with tweezers instead of Googling survival rates. Relief and catastrophe, tangled together in one ugly, hilarious, deeply human moment.
Was the mirror worth more than the peace of mind she finally had?
There is a strange paradox in the way dread and relief share the same neurological wiring. The same adrenaline that kept her terrified for weeks is what made her laugh hard enough to shatter the mirror. What is rarely discussed is how the body carries medical anxiety physically, compressing it into one specific spot until the anxiety and the cyst become the same problem. The real story here is not the cyst. It is the moment when the threat dissolves and your nervous system does not know what to do with all that sudden empty space, so it reaches for chaos instead of calm.